Welcome to the On Your Side podcast. I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell.
What do you think about this temperature outside?
It's too hot.
Well, I mean, we are in Phoenix.
I know.
It is, summertime.
It's what we prepare for.
I'm used to it.
Gary, you're not 9 months pregnant.
This is true. How are you surviving with that? I mean, you stay in the AC a lot, right?
Air conditioning all the time.
Yeah, I mean...
My two bigger kids really want to go outside and play in the sandbox every day, though, still. They don't care that it's hot.
They've got to have like an umbrella or something above them.
There's a tree that gives them some shade, but it's not enough for me. I mean...
Yeah. Do you go out there with them?
I do. You got to sit in the backyard to kind of be near them. We just don't last that long. I'm like, okay, guys, come on.
Is there like a ceiling fan on the
no
the pad?
On the tree that's above it? No.
You should stretch an extension cord out there or whatever it takes.
I need a fan.
It's getting hot in here too, isn't it? In the podcast room? Oh. Well, anyway, hey, we're talking about investing today, and that includes money, which, of course, as you know, is one of my favorite topics.
I know.
I think a lot of people are scared when it comes to investing, whether it's, the younger generation, maybe they don't know how, and then the older generation, they're, don't want to lose maybe what they have kind of like put aside. So we're going to talk about that and hopefully make people a little bit more comfortable with putting the money into something that's going to grow it.
Well, there are a lot of big terms, and it can feel a little bit unapproachable when you're looking at these things. You know, a lot of people do have some level of understanding of like a 401k retirement plan, maybe through an employer, but what should we be doing for ourselves? Should we be doing things on top of that 401k? Yeah. There are so many questions and so many big things. And I think a lot of times when things feel big, you just go, I'll deal with it later. Yeah. And then a week has passed and a month and a year. And all of a sudden, tons of time has passed and you have said, oops.
Yeah. If you don't tackle
I was supposed to do that.
If you don't tackle it, you never will. So today we're talking to Shane Stevenson. He's with Winston and Company's Retirement and Financial Services. You're right here in Phoenix, right, Shane?
That's right. Just up on the 101 here in the North Valley.
You are in our backyard, basically. So listen, thank you very much for being on the On Your Side podcast. What do you think about younger people? Do you think they're maybe a little, afraid of putting money aside, or maybe they don't even have enough money to put aside?
Well, I think that might be kind of what it is, Gary. A lot of times young people especially, they're just starting out, they're getting their first job, maybe their first salary. And the last thing that they're thinking about at that time is saving money for retirement, trying to build up wealth for later in life. And it's just something that never even crosses their mind. And that's kind of the big problem, I think. And, it probably stems from deeper things like, hey, we don't even have enough money to set aside. We don't know how to set it aside. Maybe we're nervous about the market. But I think the biggest thing is it just doesn't even cross their mind. And that's a big thing that I think needs to change.
So let's make this a little bit easier. Let's take the baby steps through this process of trying to figure out how we get started. So one of the easiest things probably is if your employer does have a retirement plan, you can jump into that. What if your employer doesn't have a plan?
Well, if your employer has a plan, like you said, Susan, that's a great place to start. Maybe they'll match your contribution, which can be great. It's an easy way. You have a conduit to kind of start saving for retirement, but not all employers, do this, like you said. So you can also start a retirement plan on your own. You can go out to any institutional investment firm out there that you've heard of and say, hey, I want to open up an IRA account. I want to start contributing money to this account every single month. Or you can even visit an advisor that will help you do this as well. Now, of course, you have to make sure you pay attention to contribution limits that are set by the IRS as to how much you can put into either a Roth, a traditional IRA. There's rules around that, but that's a great way to start putting money aside if you don't have an employer plan to help you do it.
Let's go back to the 401k just to clarify, maybe for some of the younger people. But when you put into a 401k, they have financial experts who are putting the money in different fields and different industries for you, and hopefully you just watch it grow and grow and grow every month. So people don't really have to dabble or know a whole lot about it except to just make sure that money is coming out of their paycheck directly into the 401k, and then let the financial experts handle it.
That's right. So, you'll have choices you can pick when you set up your 401k plan. A lot of times there'll be things called target date funds that you can choose. And those are going to be professionally managed by whoever's managing the 401k plan. But the one thing that I do usually see about 401ks is they're usually sort of limited on the choices. They don't give you as many options as maybe an independent option would, or working with an independent advisor. But regardless, they are going to be managed professionally to seek the return and the end goal that you're looking for.
Let's talk a little bit about Roth IRAs. People are really not familiar with them, but I think that's a great platform to kind of start investing money. And the first thing you need to do is put your foot into the door of a financial institution and say, hey, I need to open up a Roth IRA. Tell us about Roths, how they work, and what people need to know.
Well, here's the thing with Roths. It's all about the taxes. And I believe, and we believe, that taxes are going to be the biggest issue for folks pretty much over the next 50, maybe even more years. Taxes, we believe, are going to do nothing but go up in this country. I believe most of us would probably agree with that statement. So a Roth can help you avoid taxation on your retirement account. So a Roth is different than a traditional IRA because the money that you put in does not get a tax deduction. So to back up real quickly, when you put money into a 401k or an IRA, a traditional IRA, you get to deduct that tax, you get to deduct that contribution from your earnings for that year, so your income tax will be reduced. You defer that tax to a later point in life. But when you put money into a Roth, you don't get that deduction right away. So you kind of don't have an immediate sense of gratification when you use a Roth. Rather, the benefit's going to come to you down the road. So when you put money into a Roth, all the money you put in grows tax-free inside of that account. And when you go to withdraw it, as long as you follow the rules, all the withdrawals will also be tax-free. And that's a huge thing because we see so many people that are struggling with 401ks, IRAs, and other pre-tax accounts that have grown to massive numbers by the time they retire. That huge amount is then taxable. So Roth would help you avoid that. And it's a very powerful tool.
For somebody who has invested in a traditional IRA or 401k, do you just leave that money there, or do you try to roll it over into a Roth right now, pay taxes on it right now, and get that money into a tax-free situation?
That's certainly an option, and that's something we do for folks quite frequently if it makes sense for them. So you have limits on how much that you can put into a Roth every single year, but you don't have limits on what you're talking about, Susan, which is called a Roth conversion. So you could take money from a 401k, roll it to a traditional IRA, and then convert it to Roth. And by doing that, like you said, you have to pay taxes on all that money to make the conversion. But then from there on out, you're in the tax-free world pretty much for the rest of the time on that money. And that can be a very powerful thing too. But it's, that's something you want to sit down with an advisor, make sure you focus on, is this going to be in my best interest? How do we structure this? Maybe we do it over a few years, a couple different options there.
So it's like pay me now or pay me later. So if you have a 401k and you're contributing to that, or an IRA, you're not getting taxed, but you will be taxed on the back end when you are eligible to withdraw it at 59 and a half years of age. However, with the Roth, the money that you're putting into it is already taxed. So when that comes to your eligibility at 59 and a half, you won't pay tax on it. So I hope everybody understands that.
You're exactly right.
Can we jump into just investing maybe beyond for retirement? If people are interested in maybe dabbling, they've seen a share of a certain company go up and it looks really intoxicating, and you're saying, oh gosh, I want to make this kind of money, and you want to do more short-term trading or things like that. What do beginners need to know about just jumping into the stock market for, shorter term kind of trading?
Well, one of the big things about the market is that we always say there's really never a bad time. Now, we've seen the market earn quite a bit over the last 12 to 18 months. The S&P's up quite a bit. We had a few blips, but overall had some pretty nice returns. And so there's really never a super bad time to enter the market because it still remains one of the best ways to generate wealth over time. But if you do want to enter into the market, make sure that you focus on a strategy more than just going after one stock that you heard about on TV, on the internet. That can become a very, very risky proposition. You want to make sure that you spread your money out, have it diversified, and have a plan to actually achieve your long-term goals. Again, because it's very risky if you just go after one stock that you think is going to, hit a home run. That can leave you leave you pretty exposed.
Hey, I want to talk about stocks in just a little bit, but when it comes to the interest rate right now, everybody keeps hearing the interest rate's high. It's high. I mean, you're trying to get a mortgage, it's 7%. Everybody is tired of the high interest rates. The flip side, though, is because the interest rates are high, that does really that's a good thing for banks, for savers. And right now, I mean, you could put, let's just say you have a little bit of a small nest egg that's, say, $10,000. Move that into one of those high yielding savings account, which right now is a whopping like 5.5%. I see some financial institutions are advertising. That's a nice little monthly return, free money going right back into that $10,000.
Right. A lot of banks are offering pretty competitive rates right now, which are very appealing to a lot of folks. We see a lot of money going that way, and it's a good place to put money if you're looking for a steady return with basically zero market risk. The one thing to think about there, though, is we do see over time market returns will average out a lot higher than even 5.5% on the high end that you might get from a bank right now. So if you have a time horizon that you can keep this money in the market for, there's probably a pretty good likelihood that you'll actually outperform even those high bank rates by being in the market. But of course, that'll come with a little bit of risk and uncertainty as well.
What do we? I wanted to talk a little bit about stocks, so let's circle back. If somebody wants to get involved, but they don't want to do a whole lot of risk, but they just kind of want to play around just to say, hey, I'm doing this on my own. And I'll give you an example, and I'm just pulling this out of the clear blue sky, but let's just say somebody wants to buy stock in General Motors. How do they do that? How do they do that? I mean, can they do it on their own, or do they have to come to somebody like you?
Either way works, really. So you can go online to any one of these big institutions that offer, personal investing accounts. You can open up just a regular old cash brokerage account, an IRA, a Roth, all those things we talked about earlier. And within there, you can start buying and trading stocks. So if you want to buy GM, you can go in there and say, hey, I want to buy 10 shares of General Motors. Submit the request, and they'll go ahead and buy that on your behalf. Now, you can also work with a professional advisor to do that as well. When you work with someone, typically you're going to find more of a holistic approach where they're going to say, okay, rather than just buying GM stock, let's talk more about what you're actually trying to accomplish here. Are you trying to build for retirement? Are you trying to just make a few bucks right now? What are your strategies? What's your mindset? What are some of the philosophies that you support? And then let's build more of a holistic portfolio around that rather than just buying one stock, because again, that can be a fairly risky proposition if you're not diversifying your investments, right? But either way you go about it, you can certainly just buy that stock online or with an advisor.
Is that something you would advise doing after you've maxed out the retirement account, or can you do that before you've maxed out the retirement account for the year?
Well, either way works. And typically what we recommend when it comes to, your employer-sponsored 401ks is don't put more in there than what you have to put in to get the most match, right? So if you get maxed out on your match at, let's say, 2% of your salary contribution into your 401k, but let's say you want to put in 5 overall, take that other 3 and put it into an IRA or another investment account, maybe outside the 401k. And the reason why I say that is because if you go outside the 401k, you have access to the whole universe of investment choices, investment products, options, and planning. When you're inside of the 401k, typically you're pretty limited. You might have as few as 3 or 5 choices on where to put the money. And people a lot of times don't like that and they want more choice. So you can go outside and get a lot more choice. But you do, like you said, Susan, have to make sure you pay attention to those contribution limits. You want to max them out. You can max them out across multiple accounts. So let's say your contribution limit is $7,000. You can put 3 into your employer-sponsored plan for the year, get your match. The other 4 can go into a traditional IRA somewhere else. And you can still max out your contribution even if you're using multiple accounts.
Are there certain industries that are riskier or safer if you want to kind of dabble in the stock market and this is your first time buying something on your own?
Oh, yeah, of course. And that takes a lot of kind of analysis to start to figure out. But again, where we kind of go with that usually is, what is your mindset? What's your desire to take on risk? What's your time horizon that you have in front of you? And we'll start to kind of build out a mixture of industries, of companies, of other vehicles, ETFs even, or structured notes potentially even, that'll help you get where you want to go. And so we typically Don't talk specific industries, because that tends to kind of give us a view through a little narrow straw, if you will, at just a very micro part of an industry. And so that sometimes, again, leads back to more risks than most people want to take, in my opinion.
Let's talk a little bit about certificates of deposit, also known as CDs. Explain to people, and I know a lot of people have heard of these, but how do they work, and what are the pros and the cons of these CDs?
Well, with a CD, you give a bank a chunk of money, right? And they're going to say, okay, for the next 3 years, we're going to give you back 5%, let's say, on that money. And when that term ends, 3 or 5 years or more, maybe more, you can pull your money in the gains and walk. And it's not a bad place to put money, especially right now with what you were saying, Gary, about how high interest rates are. You can plop money in there and they'll give you a pretty decent return. But the only thing, again, that I'll warn you on, maybe not even warn you, but just make sure you know about, is that oftentimes you can outperform those things by having money properly invested in the market, because we know averages over time will beat those figures that you can get from the bank. And we always say that time in the market usually is more important than timing the market. So let's say you think NVIDIA stock's going to keep going, up and up and up and up. Maybe you throw some money in there right now and you find out all of a sudden it doesn't do what you thought it was going to do. That is timing the market. That's trying to hit a home run, maybe trying to, go a little bit too narrow on your approach. If you had money spread out, you had a greater time horizon, you're going to find the laws of averages work in your favor.
Yeah,
and that's kind of how they tend to beat CDs as well. But that's true.
Yeah, it's the rule of the law of averages, like you said. I love that. And by the way, if you do look into a CD, our listeners have to know that once the money is in there, it's locked up. And if you want to get it out before the term that you've committed yourself to, you're going to get penalized a big chunk.
Yep, they have early withdrawal penalties sometimes. So make sure that you can commit that money. And when you commit it, they'll give you some safety, they'll give you growth, but you do have to give up a little bit of liquidity.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a lot about newbies, about the beginner investor. For people who have been in the market for a while, they feel like, okay, we have a retirement account that we're comfortable with. Who couldn't always use a little bit more in the retirement account, right? But if you feel pretty good about where you're at, what's the advice to people who are maybe, closer to retirement age? Should they be jumping into the market right now, if outside of the 401k or IRA, if they've never jumped into the stock market independently?
So we always talk about something we call the retirement red zone, which is 5 years before and the 5 years after you retire. And that's kind of a period of time where you don't really have time to afford to a market crash or a market downturn where you lose 10, 20, 30% of your retirement assets. So if you have money in the stock market and you're approaching that retirement red zone, or if you've never even had money in the stock market, make sure you take a fairly cautious approach to investing. Because like I said, that 5 years before, 5 years after, you don't have time, you don't have the money to afford a loss. And you want to make sure you focus on, more retirement income, planning for yourself in the future, rather than trying to hit a home run kind of late in life, right before retirement. And something else to consider too, if you have money in the market or in a 401k, an IRA, any of these places, and you're approaching retirement, it's probably a good time to review those investments, get a second opinion on what you're doing with that money, because I bet you set those accounts up 10, 20, 30 years ago, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's been no changes in how those things are invested over that period of time. And I'd be willing to bet you're a different person right before retirement than you were when you set those accounts up 20 years ago. So there's probably some room for improvement in there, some space for adjustment. Don't let those things just set and forget. Pay attention to them, review them every 6 months, every year at least, to make sure you know what's going on inside of them.
Hey, Shane, how do you like your portfolio? You comfortable with it?
I'm pretty comfortable with it.
Yeah. All right. He'll leave it at that. Hey, Shane, thanks so much for being on the On Your Side podcast. If people want to find out more about you or Winston and company's retirement and financial services, where can they go? Do you have any websites, any social media?
Yeah, best way to reach us is online at winstonandcompanies.com, or give us a call at the office here at 602-456-1928. And of course, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and all over online.
All the good places.
Hey, Shane, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And Susan does as well. And we'll see you again soon, okay?
Gary, Susan, thanks so much again.
The On Your Side podcast is produced by Brad Denny. Our audio engineer and editor is Todd Martin. Segment producer is Colin Stanton. And I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell. If you have a problem you can't resolve, maybe we can't, send us a message through azfamily.com or our AZ Family mobile app. Look for the On Your Side section and leave us a message. Thanks so much for listening to the On Your Side podcast. And if you like it, leave us a review. We'll see you next week.
On Your Side is on Good Morning Arizona every weekday morning at 6:45 and 7 o'clock, and every weekday evening on Good Evening Arizona at 4 and 5 o'clock. You can also catch it on Arizona's Family News at 9 on 3TV every weeknight.